Hello and thank you for joining me. I am Bev Turner and this is GBN Originals, where you and I get to talk about the significant changes to human life which are coming over the horizon. Now, it can be difficult to work out how these shifts actually happen. I mean, how alterations to our financial, residential, heck, even spiritual lives come into being whilst nobody is really watching. But this is one of those moments where I think we can break down the forces at work, which could change everything forever. Now, I know that sounds like BS, at best exaggeration, at worst baseless fear-mongering. But I have no agenda here other than to get us off the path towards living in a digital cage against a miserable backdrop of solar panels instead of trees, eating bugs instead of steak, and only being allowed outside of our 15-minute cities once we've self-flagellated at the behest of the political state. I am sick of it all. So with that in mind, let's have a look at the UK's Climate and Nature Bill, which is slithering towards becoming law. It's the rather nattily named Can Bill. Well, let's hope they can't, because the vague provisions contained therein may open the door to nefarious forces grabbing land, houses, money, and frankly, all your freedoms under the emergency of, you guessed it, saving the planet. In a nutshell, the Can Bill could force rewilding of farmers' fields. It could see costs driving farmers off their land. It could collapse food production and therefore entire rural economies. The rapidly forced end of fossil fuels will push energy prices through the roof, leaving families in the cold and shutting down businesses. Affordable holidays and everyday travel will become luxuries. Restrictions and taxes could make personal mobility impossible. Property rights would be taken away, with homeowners and farmers potentially losing control of their land and homes under vague conservation and sustainability goals. The UK will be torn apart by these policies, while countries like China and India will dominate, leaving us weak and dependent. But why? We'll come on to that. But first, I need to thank Chris Littlewood, whose ex-post I just paraphrased. But why should it take a lowly ex-user, sorry Chris, to bring this to my attention? I work in a newsroom, for God's sake, and even I didn't know about it. In truth, that's a tough question to answer. But probably it's because hundreds of bills are debated and voted on every year in Parliament, and it's easy to hide away the apparently non-controversial ones. This system works for shady civil servants and men in grey suits who push through change before we've even noticed. This is what's called a private member's bill, which means a proposal introduced by either members of the House of Commons or House of Lords who are not ministers. So who did ask for this bill to potentially morph into law? Well, it started life as the Climate and Ecology Bill in September 2020, when the world was neck deep in a convenient pandemic that allowed nonsense like this to get a toehold. Today, its creators describe it as a plan for a new UK law that addresses the full extent of the climate and nature crisis in line with the most up-to-date science. It started life under Caroline Lucas, Green Party MP, and her backers. Now it is driven by a campaign called 0 Hour. Now remember, any ambition which hopes to reach zero of anything is invariably despotic, utopian, and frankly nuts. So who are these people who've stuck this in the hands of a newly elected MP who we will meet in just a minute? Well, since its first iteration, they've added the word emergency, as it clearly wasn't hitting the right note of fear. The bill, say the 0 Hour zealots, is the only proposed legislation before the UK Parliament that ensures a comprehensive and joined-up approach to the emergency. I'm sorry, but there is rather a lot of debate still to be had about whether we are in an actual emergency, but the architects of this bill have managed to convince what they call 1,738 incredible, who wouldn't want to be described as incredible, organisations, politicians and scientists. The MP list alone reads like a who's who of useful idiots who want to stick their names to anything which makes them look like a good person. The list is vast, and that's before we've even looked at the number of charities, celebrities and organisations also backing this bill. Everyone from Extinction Rebellion to the Beaver Trust, the Co-op, and that Agenda 2030 colourful logo appears on a lot of the shadowy outfits pushing this through. It is impossible to pursue the inherent vested interests in all 1,738 supporters. But put it this way, I bet it's more about making money than saving beavers. You just need the beaver people to add weight to the numbers, along with what is probably their genuine concern for beavers. And I wonder how many people who've backed it have really thought it through. So which MP now has ownership of this potentially disastrous piece of legislation? It may well do a lot of good work for newts and bats and bumblebees and billionaires, but the benefit to the ordinary person just trying to make a living outside of the spying eyes of a demonic state, not so much benefit. Meet Roz Savage, MP. An impressive woman by any definition, a brand new Liberal Democrat who became a parliamentarian only 6 months ago after making a name for herself as a solo ocean rower. On her website, Roz writes, just over a month ago, on the 5th of September, rather like the National Lottery or FA Cup draw, but with the potential to ruin Great Britain rather than match up two football teams, a white-gloved deputy speaker drew 20 numbered balls out of a glass bowl. This was to decide which MPs would get the opportunity to try and make a new law. Now, who wouldn't want to make a new law? Imagine the kudos. Imagine the ego boost. Imagine the trail of destruction she's going to leave in her wake. My number, Roz goes on, was 396 and was the third one drawn. Many MPs go through an entire career without being drawn in the ballot. So I feel incredibly fortunate and determined to make the most of this chance to potentially get something significant changed. Now, if this were a murder inquiry, and let's be honest, the parallels are real, there is your motive. Fame, notoriety, ego. The chance to make a significant change to the world and guarantee yourself speaking gigs into the future, which will inevitably dry up as those ocean rows retreat into the distance. All it takes for shoddy laws to get passed are enough people fulfilling their own simple needs. Savage goes on. The ballot result was barely announced when my email inbox exploded with hundreds of constituents, campaigners and organisations all wanting me to support their cause. I wish I could have taken on all of them, but I had to pick just one. Oh, the power. Fortunately, she says, that's debatable, one issue far outnumbered all others and was in perfect alignment with my own heart and with the future well-being of the beautiful South Cotswolds. Unless she wants the South Cotswolds to house industrial solar panel estates owned by BlackRock instead of centuries-old farms. As most of you know, she goes on, I've been an environmental campaigner for the last 20 years. This included rowing solo across 3 oceans to raise awareness of the growing ecological crisis. While I was out there alone in the middle of the ocean, I witnessed the beauty and strength of the natural world firsthand. I realised how utterly reliant we are on the health of our planet and how vulnerable we are to the Earth's changing climate. Now, I like whales, and I respect people who do such crazy challenges. They are very entertaining for us mere mortals. But you do have to wonder whether they've got the psychological health to make balanced decisions with empathy and compassion, rather than seeing merely a finish line with personal glory at the end of it. Now that I am an MP, she goes on, I want to do everything I can to get to the root causes of the intertwined climate and nature crises. Now that is a noble ambition, but Roslov, do your research into the intertwined crises that are looming before backing such an astonishing act of national self-harm. The bill, she claims, has the potential to make the UK a world leader in tackling the climate and nature crisis, which is actual bollocks because we contribute barely 1% of global carbon emissions. Of course, we all want healthy fields, forests, clean rivers and seas. But is it correct for Roz Savage to say that this bill is a comprehensive, joined-up plan that is finally aligned with what the science says is necessary? The science. That phrase gives me PTSD. This bill, when law, would, she says, pave the way for a truly fair transition whilst ensuring that citizens have a real say in the way forward. And that last bit is actually the most hilarious. Do you feel that you have had a say in this way forward? It's not so much what is written explicitly here that will raise alarm bells, and this is why it's so dangerous. The vague, woolly wording will allow any slippery lawyer-backed corporate interest or politician to use it as a moral, let's say, a sort of VIP lane to getting whatever they want under the auspices of prioritising climate and nature at every junction. And much of what it proposes cannot happen without carbon tracking and surveillance, as it's based on data. For instance, Section 2.3a specifies limiting the UK's total emissions of carbon dioxide to its proportionate share of the global carbon budget. This implies the need for tracking emissions comprehensively, potentially extending to individual consumption. Section 2.3b targets emissions related to imports, requiring detailed monitoring of goods and services. This cannot happen without sophisticated digital systems to track carbon footprints at a granular level, affecting every business and every consumer. Section 2.3h discusses minimising adverse impacts from production, consumption and trade, which includes deforestation and pollution. Now, that cannot be done without tracking the supply chain and potentially implementing carbon credits or restrictions tied to your consumer behaviour. There's a section on regulatory compliance and transition, Section 2.5c, which outlines support for transitioning from high emission industries, potentially enforcing shifts in employment and lifestyle choices. Section 2.3f to h promotes restoring ecosystems and avoiding nature loss. Now, enforcing this may require restraints on land use, agriculture and urban development, directly impacting public and private property rights. So you see, their goals may sound wonderful, with blue tits tweeting about our heads as we waft through fields of wheat, but there will be no scope to debate whether the costs are worth the benefits. If we must track everyone's choices, travel, diet, occupation, reducing every little human behaviour to an arbitrary carbon metric, we'll all go mad. We'll be cold, poor, hungry, locked in a digital cage, while an ex-rower gets applauded by massive transnational corporations getting fat on our poverty. The briefing notes explaining the bill on the 0 Hour website say the CAN bill has a holistic nature target that would increase health, abundance, diversity and resilience of species, populations, habitats and ecosystems, so that by 2030 nature is visibly and measurably on the path of recovery. And as you can see here from their very persuasive graphic, between 2030 and 2050, the UK will be awash with crocodiles, sharks and elephants, which makes perfect sense. So what can you do? Write to your MP. I guarantee that the Just Stop Oil Extinction Rebellion lot are currently adding meaning to their otherwise meaningless lives by harassing their MPs to vote for this. Why should you not ask that your MP does the opposite, or to at least take a step back, educate themselves on the UN's Agenda 2030 and use their imaginations? There's a very good video that we did on the UN Agenda 2030. Send them in that direction. Urge them to apply some skepticism to this so-called emergency. Ask more questions, demand more answers about the tech revolution that will be required to snare us all in this punitive Orwellian vision of the future. Ask your MP how we will be able to quantify these emissions without tracking our consumption patterns, and how will we be protected from large-scale data collection? How will carbon budgets translate into restrictions on consumer behaviour, limiting travel, meat consumption or energy use? How can the state do all of that enshrined in law without enforced digital tracking systems? As the 0 Hour website says, weaning ourselves off fossil fuels means big changes, so it's important that everyone is on board with them. For a start, Adults don't need weaning off anything. Thank you very much. And we are not all on board with your depressing vision of a meat-free, coal-free, farm-free future, no matter how many beavers you save. And maybe the can bill should just be canned until we've truly considered the implications for our freedoms. The bill is getting a second reading in Parliament on January the 24th, so raise awareness now. Please share this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Let me, Bev Turner, know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay vigilant and I'll see you next time.